What's the worst substrate to work with?
Oh gosh, I would, no offense to corrugate, but I say that just because of the limitations. You have to really be creative when you're limited.
Corrugated people don't come for us just yet, but that's exactly why you have to hear this episode. Today's guest is Stephanie Doyle, Director of Design and Implementation over at hbxbranding.com. She is the person standing between your design file and $1 million print run going completely sideways. Stephanie works with print vendors, separators, and manufacturers every single day. She is the bridge between creative and production. If your dieline's off, if your color shifts, if your barcode doesn't scan, she's the one that keeps it from turning into an expensive disaster. And we're not wasting any time. We're going to jump right in with what on earth is a separator. From there, we get into the real stuff that every packaging designer needs to know if they want to survive production. If you're new to packaging design, then here are 3 of the game-changing things that you're going to learn from this episode. Vector is king or queen. Keep your copy crisp, your design details sharp, and your files press ready. And respect the die line. It's more than a template. It's the engineering blueprint for your entire package. By the end of this episode, you're going to design smarter, you're going to hand off cleaner files, and actually earn respect from the printers that are going to run your work. Let's get to it. What is a separator?
So we don't do separations, but a separator, that's the step between mechanical artwork, so a final layout that we provide as a creative agency. It's the step between us and the printer. So once we give the file, you can't just hit control print, right? I mean, unless it's digital, but that's a whole other discussion. So they're actually taking our files, they're separating out the colors, right? So remember, this is going to be printed. Each color is its own printing station, its own plate, for instance. So they're taking that and they're kind of like, they're like surgeons, right? They're like dissecting our work. It's very technical. We don't do that. They work with the printers specifically so they know how their presses are working so they can fine tune our file so it looks the best.
Isn't that typically a pre-press department within the printer?
Yes. So a lot of printers do have that internally, but there are certain organizations and companies that specifically just do separations. And usually it's for, say, really big brands where they're printing globally. They have thousands of SKUs that they're trying to color manage across multiple vendors, multiple regions. So, there are specific companies that just do that.
Wow. I didn't realize that still existed.
Yeah.
I just assume those guys have kind of worked their way out. Like, in the old days, you would send your files to someone that would then do it. And then you would get a file back that you take to a printer. So we're going to get into color, file setup before we even get to you've designed something and before it actually goes into mass production, there's the proofing stage, right? So I think probably happens before you even get to the separator.
Yes, correct.
So what are the fatal mistakes that people do before proofing?
So I think people have to really understand the parameters, right? What substrate are we printing on? How many color stations? What's the type of printing? Is it digital? Is it offset? Is it flexo? I mean, there's multiple types. And by knowing all that ahead of time, you have to prepare your file accordingly to that. So, this way, when you do send it off to the printer, it's ready to go. It's not, the printer's not going to receive something that's, say, RGB images. And they're like, well, I'm not printing RGB. Yeah. That's something you're viewing on screen, which is fine for web. But when it comes to a product that's actually going to live and sit on shelf, we need to make sure everything is aligned for their capabilities to get it there, to make it look good. It's definitely knowing those parameters ahead of time so you can then build your files accordingly. So there's less back and forth. So I would encourage any designer, creative agency, have a pre-pro with the printer. That's a must. And we do that typically during the all panel stage. So we want to, as soon as the client approves that first alt panel, we're like, boom, let's get on the call with the printer, make sure what we're doing aligns with how they're going to print it, make sure it aligns with their printing specs. The type has to be a certain size. There's all these little tiny rules, and you really can lean on them to help and guide you through that process. So then by the time you finalize the file and you send it off, it's good to go.
What's the worst file you remember ever being sent?
I've seen an all panel layout, a mechanical, okay, all in Photoshop. Not at the company I'm at right now, but I've seen that. And, from my experience, the 20 years I've been doing packaging, we do not do all panel layouts in Photoshop. Because typically it's an Illustrator file. It needs to be layered. So that's the other thing. I hate when I get a file to review, to look at before we're sending it out the door. And, if there's not the proper layer sequence, it just causes more work for the printer, which then ends up causing delays. And, so once again, the more efficient you are up front in the creative design process, the smoother it's going to go in that transition of giving that file then to the printer.
Let's kind of dig into that a little bit. Like, why would somebody not want to do a file in Photoshop? Right? Because people are like, oh, I've learned how to do Photoshop. I don't want to do that Illustrator thing. That seems so complicated. Let me just do everything in Photoshop. And it looks great on screen. So like, what would be the problem?
That's a great question. I think we just been trained for so long that Illustrator, for packaging, and I'm talking packaging specific, right? This could be a little different for ad agencies, it's always been Illustrator. I think because of how that exports out when they do those separations and the programs that they're using, it just flows better, right? Like I know in Photoshop, obviously you can have layers in Photoshop, right?
Yeah.
But Illustrator, it's just a different animal. It's a different program, and it's there for a reason. Each program, just like InDesign, right? If you're creating a magazine, you're most likely using InDesign versus say Illustrator versus Photoshop. So each program has its specific usage.
Sure. Yeah. And I would add to that. So if you're listening and you're like, oh man, I know Photoshop, or I can use Canva, or you're right. Like people are doing all sorts of stuff in Canva now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are going to be raster images, right? And raster, you're going to get like the bit mapping. And if we're getting into like your nutritional facts or like detailed like knockout ingredients copy, it's going to look blurry coming out of a Photoshop file versus a vector, which is like just, mathematical lines cutting out of the artwork.
Same thing, glows, right? You got just like you pointed out. So picture a glow in Photoshop, which then is a raster element versus Illustrator, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are all the key differences of why you should use Illustrator versus that. Now, if say you love working in Photoshop, okay, if we have an image on a package that we're working with, those are all Photoshop links. I'm not saying you can't incorporate both. You definitely, there could be in a time and a place. Like we have a particular client where they do only print digital, and it's almost like a scene, so to speak. That's all in Photoshop. Like we create everything in Photoshop there, that background scene, bring that into Illustrator, but then all the type elements are in Illustrator, which then get outlined to send to the printer.
Yeah. And and if you're doing like black copy coming out of Photoshop, you're probably not going to go in and make that black copy 100% black. It might be a built black or some kind of variation of that, which then is going to be a little blurry. But if you're bringing that into Illustrator, then you can just make it 100% black. Or if you've got, white text around a CMYK background, you can put a little stroke around it. Like if it's, I'm looking at Delve, right? And it's like the light green, I would probably put like a white, my white logo, and then put a slight, maybe yellow stroke around there, like a half a point or something, so that those dots don't bleed in and give you kind of like a blurry look. Like there's little tips and tricks, and your printer's going to know this stuff.
Yes, exactly. And that's why, I encourage those conversations ahead of time, right? And everyone loves to share their tips and tricks, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what makes it efficient.
I always tell designers, like, make an effort to get to a printer, watch what they're doing, have a conversation with them, see what problems they're running into, show them your file, because they're going to be like, oh, this is great, but here's some areas you're going to run into issues with, or here's ways that we can do it better. Yep. And like build that relationship. Because I think like the more that you know, the better designer you could possibly be.
Yeah. And it really is a collaboration. Like, so speaking of that Delve project, we were limited with the amount of color stations we had for the retail cup. So we had 7 stations to work with. And you start counting out in your head, well, I got 4 color process. I got my spot colors for my brand, because the difference is I don't want my brand to fluctuate on press, right? I don't want those colors to start shifting. If, say, we get to press and we're like, oh, let's adjust the yellow a little bit because the cheese is, looking too hot. Well, guess what? You adjust that yellow, that's affecting then your brand color. So that's why we're making those spot colors across the board. They're always going to be more vibrant. You'll never get 4 color process to match the vibrancy that you will get from a spot color. There is something called EG, extended gamut or expanded gamut. It's kind of like a universal. I don't know which one to say and when, but EG essentially is 4 color process plus orange, green, and violet. So that will help get you those brighter colors that you're used to seeing with spot, but it's not a spot color. It's still process.
Is EG in digital or offset?
You can see EG in digital. You can also see it in Flexo too. Okay. So we've used it depending on the circumstance. We've used it in both. So for instance, the Delve labels here on the retail, this was digitally printed. This is a sticker. And we're able to get it a little more vibrant by utilizing certain colors. It's once again, it's like it depends.
Right. Yeah. That's the big thing in packaging and in designs. Like there's all these hard and fast rules, but each rule has its own, it depends. Right.
Yeah. That's kind of the answer for all of it. Yeah. Yeah.
So real quick, you mentioned stations.
Yeah.
Like 7 stations. What is a station?
Great question. I know sometimes I use these words. I'm like, people are probably like scratching their head. Like, I don't understand. So these are essentially every color that you're printing is a station. So it's an ink color. So for instance, 4 color process, right? We have, those are 4 stations for each one of those colors. I would say on a standard, we do a lot of Flexo printing, because we're doing a lot of stand-up pouches, a lot of bags. So a lot of what we do is Flexo on film. And I would say between 9 and 10 is kind of the max. But once again, the more stations you're using, the cost goes up.
Sure.
So if the client only wants to pay for, say, 6 stations, then that's something you have to work with, depending on what your artwork looks like, whether 4 color process is going to eat up 4 of those stations, then you're only left with 1, which can be a spot color or a varnish or a white. So it depends.
Sure. So then if you're doing, all right, so if you're doing a 4 color process, you're going to varnish that. So that's going to be 5. So you got your cyan, magenta, yellow, black, plus your varnish. That's 5 stations. Okay. And then if you wanted to do a white, now you've got to move that from that 5 color machine to one that's got more colors. And that's where your price goes up, right? Because the bigger the machines, the more costly.
Yep. And another plate. Think about it too. It's more material, right? It's another plate.
What's a plate cost?
So cost? I don't know. Luckily we are not involved in that process of quoting, because I think if it was up to the creative, you'd be like, yeah, let's add all the colors in the world. Right. But that's not realistic. If anything, if we find opportunity to minimize colors, we will. So going back to that Delve, we only had 7 colors to work with on this. This is printing Flexo directly onto this plastic here. we decided to knock out black, kick it out. We don't need it. And that was based off of the various flavors, looking at that artwork, right? And realizing, okay, we got to get rid of a color. Which one are we going to do? And black was that. Because, cyan actually, in printing wise, does a really good job for, say, deepening shadows. People don't realize when they see something, they're like, oh, it must be the black. Like the black is causing that. And a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's actually the cyan that's causing, say, shadows to look a little bit darker. So.
Now, all right. So I'm looking at the Delve, and I'll bring it up on screen here in a minute, but like the basil pesto parm, the green one, basil pesto parm is in a really dark green.
Yes.
Right. So is that green a spot color?
It is. Yeah. So for this brand, we were using 2 spot colors. So one for the background to get it super vibrant. We knew we wanted this line to pop off shelf, to stand out amongst all the other cheese spreads that are out there. And then we knew we didn't want the name of the flavor to be attached to the artwork. So when we go to press, we didn't want that fluctuation to happen. So therefore we decided, let's make that a spot color as well. So that's how that thought process came to be, by understanding the overall circumstances of how it's being printed and what the actual artwork looks like. So that's how you kind of determine what should be spot versus what should be process.
Okay. So continuing the conversation on color, where do designers get it wrong? And I think, before we hopped on here, we talked about whether white was a color, right? And in this case, it is.
In packaging, it is, because it counts as one of our stations. It definitely is a color. A lot of times we do 2 hits of white too, if we're printing on a clear substrate, just to give it that little bit more opacity. I forget what the actual percentage is. It's not a whole lot, but it does help a little bit, especially if, once again, printing on something that's clear and you're trying not to let the product that's inside that influence your design. Same thing if you're trying to print on metal film. So for instance, like a dog food bag, right? A lot of times they have a metal interior or a chip bag. That's dark. Metal layers are dark. It's going to make it this dirty gray color. So if you didn't have white, your design would reflect that.
All right, let's take a quick second to talk about idpdirect.com. Go right to that website, download the design guides, the sustainability guides, the recyclable icon guide, which basically lists out all the different icons. It gives them to you in vectors. You can drop them right into your artwork right now, today, and go right into production. All right, back to the pod. So if you're printing on clear, white is an ink. So
Correct.
If you're on a 5-color station, then you would have your CMYK if that's what you're doing, and then white. And in that case, you'd only have 1 hit of white, which is not going to be as opaque. So you'll see a little bit of what's inside. And if that's okay with you, because it saves you money, great. But if you're trying to get that really opaque white, now you've got to get 2 hits, which means you've gone from 4-color plus the white to now 4-color plus 2 hits of white. So you need to move into a 6 or 7 station press.
Correct. Yeah. There's, which I think you pointed out before, that could be a whole different machine. At the printer, they may have to then switch which machine they're ultimately going to be printing these on. White is important. Same thing with your varnishes. Does it need a varnish? If so, there's lots of options. Do you want it matte? Do you want it gloss? Do you want a registered varnish, which is really cool? So that's where, say, if you're printing on gloss and you want certain elements to be matte or vice versa, right? If you're printing on a soft touch, that nice velvety texture that you feel, and you want to pop certain elements, you're going to put a registered gloss varnish on that.
And that's another station. Right?
That's another station. Yeah.
But
printers love when we put those registered varnishes. Every time they're always like, because I think it slows down the presses for them. And it's hard to maintain, you're trying to line up something because the varnish is applied afterwards. Right. So everything's printed first. Sometimes it's inline, we call it. So it'll just be added on right after all the other colors, or sometimes it's offline, which is really tough. So they gotta, once it's printed, they then move it to another machine to then just print the registered varnish. So it's tough. Lining up that registration is not easy.
Yeah. No, and I would say beyond tough, it's what have you had the customer approve on color? Because once you apply this varnish on top of the color, that color is going to change, right? Sometimes it gets a little bit darker.
I love that you're pointing this out, because we had a client, Bill Jack, who typically only printed on gloss bags, but they have this new product out that they really wanted to leverage, right? It's a premium product. It's their performance line. So we knew we wanted to utilize a dual finish for that. So we're like, okay, we know we want to add matte to it, but how is matte going to affect that overall dark blue color? Because I don't think people understand matte is it has a dulling factor, right? So sometimes it can make colors look dusty and dull. Say if you have the imagery, it'll really just take that vibrancy out of it. But it also has advantages of, once again, giving you that punch, right? So for instance, in Bill Jack case, we wanted that dog to be glossy. We wanted the logo to be glossy, and that background was matte. So we actually did a print test to get to that point, to determine exactly which colors we wanted to overprint on top of each other to then create this darker blue and then put the matte on it. So this this took advantage of an actual print test.
And just like showing it here. So you've got the dog, you've got the background, and then you're doing a gloss versus matte. Not only is it helping separate color, like the color itself is helping the dog come off the background, but then having that hit of matte versus gloss separates even more visually.
Even more. Yeah. You really notice it. The rendering's tough, right? You can't quite tell what's matte, but like in the actual bag, I mean, you see those reflections.
Yeah.
And for us, the challenge was, once again, figuring out that dark blue, because it does have a glow to it. And we do have a brand color that we want to maintain. So a certain color palette. So do we overlap two different spot colors? Do we overlap, say, a black, which we ended up doing that. So here's a great example. This is the actual mechanical, and this is the varnish plate. So this was printing on a gloss substrate to begin with. So what you're seeing in pink is matte. What you're seeing in white is the substrate.
Coming through. Okay.
Yeah. So when you do supply a file to the printer and you want to utilize some sort of dual finish like this, that has to be shown. It's not like you just point it out and say, hey, make this glossy. Like it needs to be actually a layer in Illustrator that'll say matte plate or gloss plate. And that's what they're going to use to determine what gets that dual finish.
Got it. So then, I'm taking my dieline, I'm placing on my artwork. These in Illustrator, these elements are coming in from Photoshop, like the dog, the logo, all that stuff from Photoshop. The text is all Illustrator. And then I can then go in and select the pieces that I want, gloss versus varnish. And depending on what it is that we're applying, if we're applying a gloss or if we're applying a matte, I like to make that a spot color in Illustrator, and then just call it out like that spot color is now named matte varnish or whatever that is, and then knock out everything else.
Yep. Yeah, you do. So we, and the reason why you're going to make that, its own Pantone swatch is because at 100% of that color, it's 100% of that matte. Then we go down to 0%, which is reflected and shown as white here. So we're actually sliding the little swatch color slider to show that. So if you were to click on this in the file, it would read 0% matte, 100% matte. Same thing with the white.
Not the opacity slider.
Correct. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
Because I get files like that where the opacity is to 0. I'm like, that it's still
No.
going to be 100%. So.
Yeah, no, the actual swatch. And same thing with the white plate. And white's a little different, right? It's not always just 100% or 0%. It can be, say, 50%. You can do little increments there as well.
Yeah. So let's kind of look at this die line. And a lot of people get die lines. Sometimes, these sometimes they're a little bit more technical, some are less. But there's a lot of colors. There's a lot of lines happening here.
Yes.
What is somebody that's designing for the first time? Like, what do they need to be worried about? What do they need to be looking at?
So it can look really overwhelming at first. But most die lines are supplied with a little key. Okay. And that key will represent what each line stands for. So for instance, the line that has the dash and 2 dots, it kind of looks like a little Morse Cody, like, that's your copy safe line. So you don't want copy to go outside that line. And the reason being, it's going to get too close to the edge. And if there's any sort of shifting, you don't want your copy to come off. So you can see down at that bottom left, that is their key. So you have the actual die line, you have seal areas, trim, which is, when it's converted, that's where it's actually being sliced. You always had bleed. So the die line's going to build in either bleed. Sometimes they don't always. So you have to add in your own bleed. And the reason for that is, things shift. It's, as much as we want printing to be perfect, it's not. There's always going to be a little wiggle room. These are high power machines moving really fast. So there
you'll
is
have like
some fluctuation.
So you'd have like a plus or minus 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter tolerance, right?
Yeah. So you just want to account for that. And if a die line doesn't have this key, ask the printer. Go back to them. Ask those questions. I always, as soon as we get a die line, I open it up. I make sure it's 100% scaled. The worst thing in the world is realizing after the fact that the die line, the PDF you dragged into Illustrator was only at 50%. So there's always measurements on die lines. Make sure you check it. It's got to be 100%. Save yourself the time. I also look for, once again, we deal with a lot of food products. So date codes. Where's the date code? Is it on the die line? If it's not,
what do you mean
ask.
a date code? This is new to me. What is this? What's a date code?
So if we scroll, keep scrolling. So the date code is where after the bags are converted, this happens at the co-man level. They're going to print the best by date here. So when it's expired, when to use it by. See there? Date codes can be anywhere. And usually they're dictated by the co-man, depending on their equipment, where it actually needs to go. So this particular one is at the bottom of the bag, which is fantastic. I've had others that are
But it's at the top of the die line. How's this the bottom of the bag, right?
So, great question. Die lines,
I'm just going through all the questions that I get from clients all the time. So it's like,
there's a great feature in Illustrator called the rotate tool, and we need to rotate to see it, say, right side up. But when this is being printed, that's how it's printed, right? Because everything's printed flat. So that's the direction that it's going. So once that die line actually gets sliced, formed into a real bag, the seals are all glued, then you get, look at that, date codes at the bottom. So once again, die lines can be a little confusing at first. That's why I encourage you, if you have a question, ask, am I doing this panel right? Am I doing in the right direction? You'll notice that back panel text that's on that die line, it's written in that direction for a reason, because the printer wants you to know that is the direction the copy should be facing.
Yeah.
So you will see that on die lines.
So like if we look at this entire die line, then we've got our front panel. It's right reading. And the reason for this is like, this is where you're really going to focus. you're obviously going to design everything, but like, here's where everything starts. But it's cut off at the bottom here in the front. Then we've got the zipper area, and you've got the gap between here that's going to fold and possibly cut. Mm-hmm. Then the back panel, like you said, it's upside down because that's the way that it's going to print. Date code area, and then the bottom, and it tells you which way it's going to print and which way it's going to read. Really, the bottom, I think you can kind of flip it either way, depending on what you want for the brand. But like, being able to look at this and understand what you're doing is extremely helpful, because you're not going to waste your time. If you've got a color, a background, a gradient texture that's going to bleed off of the front down and go onto the bottom panel, you're going to want to align that, and you've got to see that here. Yeah. And then like looking at some of these little details, like we were talking earlier on the die line. So we've got this green outer edge is
which
the die.
Will be your bleed. Yeah. So that's where we would bleed the artwork to.
And
so that's not necessarily
what does that
trim
mean?
line. So bleed, it's giving you that little bit of wiggle room. Because once again, when this gets sliced, there is a slight variance that could happen. Not to say it will happen. It may happen to 1 out of every 1,000 impressions, but it could happen. So therefore, you bleed that color out. Because think about it. If you didn't have that bleed and it sliced it, you may see the clear film that it's being printed on, or the white film that it's printed on. And by film, I mean the actual, like, what gets printed on and then gets laminated to the bag.
Sure.
So, there's multiple layers of plastic, right? So especially in Flexo for these bags or stand-up pouches, you're printing on this thin sheet of plastic. And that's what we call film. Not like your, old school camera that you and I are probably used to
for
using.
Sure. Okay. No, perfect. So like your bleed. So in this case, up here along the top edge, this dark blue would bleed off. It would extend past that area.
Yep.
This gold would extend past. And then if we wanted to have a larger dog on here that was coming off the bag, his body would extend past that to be cut off.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
And then looking at this, then we also have, you also have like this trim area. So that's where it'll actually cut. So like we're seeing here, like it's right next to his foot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's the part that actually gets cut. There are, and once again, you really do have to read the die lines, because say if you're working with a small pouch, sometimes you can't bleed the artwork to the edge. When you can, it's called an infinite edge. So it's sliced twice in between the impressions. Because think about it, right? When you're printing something, it's not just one package you're printing. They have a web, meaning the width. You may have 5 impressions of, say, the same design. So they'll use a double knife, they call it. They slice it twice so you can bleed. But sometimes, whether it's a cost reason, they'll only do a single knife, and therefore the artwork doesn't bleed over. And that is something that will be noted on the die line. It'll also be noted during the conversation with the printer, what they quoted your client. So these are all kind of questions that, once again, you want to just have in your toolbox ready, know to ask. So when you get all the resources, you could get running. There's no, oh, well, where's the die line now? I forgot that there needs to be a die line. Yeah. What direction does the UPC need to go? A lot of times that can be dictated by the direction it's being printed. So I always ask that too.
and you brought up the date? What was that section
date
called?
Code.
The date code. Does that need to be like a white area or just a blank area with no technical?
So, usually that area is, either a tinted back color. You don't want graphics really running through it because it's important that the date code is legible. So that date code is applied after the fact. It's usually inkjet on, which is black, very common. Sometimes it's etched in like a white ink. So that Bill Jack one, for instance, that's more the etching style, like kind of lasers into it.
You like feel it.
Yeah. And then, but I would say more commonly, right, is the black inkjet. So you don't want to pick a color that's not going to allow you to read it. Because remember, consumers, you want to know when your, yogurt expires or your dog food or your, whatever it is. It's very important to be able to read that. It may be a little bit of a, eyesore from a design perspective, but it has a functional purpose.
And then just on the design side, it's letting you know, keep this area blank, right?
Yeah. Yep.
If finding your spec data is a wild goose chase around your office, you've got a data problem. SpecRite is the only cloud-based management specification solution that every brand needs. Because if you don't spec right, you'll spec wrong. Because it's so easy to get caught up in the design and you're like, oh, I don't want to, I'm going to run my complex pattern across this whole area.
Yeah.
And then critical information like this becomes illegible.
Yeah. And then a lot of times that area will be knocked out of the varnish too. Because you don't want to have to worry about, depending on the type of varnish and substrate you're using, you don't want it to smudge.
Yeah.
So, and once again, the printer will help assist in that, whether they feel it needs to be knocked out of the varnish. And by knocked out, I mean just not printed. The varnish won't go over that particular area. So
that you're not getting that contrast and sheen. And then also we want to make sure that surface can accept the inkjet if that's what's happening on there as well.
Yep.
No, perfect. So I wanted to kind of get into Delve, which you were kind enough to share a ton of stuff on.
Yeah, this was a fun project for us. Once again, a really saturated category too, in the cheese spread world. So how do you stand out? And that's why I think color was had a huge impact on this. Not only were the graphics great, but the colors were just so vibrant.
And what is Delve?
So Delve is a spreadable cheese dip. They sell it in club stores. They also sell it in retail, which means we had two different containers to work with. What you're seeing here is actually a club store one. So it's a little bit larger of a container. This one utilizes IML printing.
What is IML?
In mold label. So
what is in mold label?
IML is, let's say you have this container and you're trying to scratch off the label or peel it off and you can't. That's IML. It's literally infused into the plastic.
So it's not printed on the plastic.
It's not printed on the plastic container. It's still printed on plastic film. So for instance, this was a tear sheet, meaning this came off the press. This is what I used to approve it before they printed hundreds of thousands. So it's printed on a film here.
Yeah.
That then gets cut out. And it's really neat to see, by the way, how they actually do this. They use a lot of magnetic, like static charge. So the label goes into this metal mold and then the plastic adheres to that. And they use water. It's high temperature, but then they use water really quick to cool it off. But it's almost infused together.
Wow.
Rapid. I mean, we're talking like seconds, not even. Like if you blink, you missed it. Yeah. So it's literally infused into the plastic. And that's why you can't scrape it off, rub it off. But it has great properties for moisture barriers. Is it in a wet environment? This is sold in the refrigerated section.
Sure.
So you're kind of dealing with that moisture condensation. So it provides all the protective aspects, and the printing on it is fantastic.
Okay. So then on the sheet that you were showing, is this printed in reverse on the back side of the sheet so that it's trapped between the top of the film and the container plastic?
So this I believe it's surfaced printed. I actually don't know. I don't remember.
Sure.
If the part.
Why would you print on one side of the film versus another? Like when would you do it on the outside?
So,
when you do it on the inside?
A lot of times, once again, it comes down to that protective layer. So reverse printing versus surface printing, it kind of builds in that resistance. You may not need a varnish then. So say if you didn't want that dual finish look,
sure,
like you wanted the whole thing to be gloss. And if it was reverse print, great, we're done. I don't have to worry about an added coating to kind of help cure the inks and protect them from scratching. So it's, that's part of what determines it. I know with the IML, you can see it almost has like a little texture to it. And I do believe these are a specific type of film that can stretch and expand. They have different properties than say something you would use for a bag, right? Those plastic properties.
Yeah. Okay. And then just like looking through some of these pages here, we've got these dielines, and then we're showing the panel with the art. So tell me about this. Like, what are we looking at here? And on the left, I can see the key. So that's kind of cool. We can get into that too.
So this is the white plate that you're looking at. And for us, we have a standard. We always use blue for white and pink for matte or gloss. Every company is a little different, but the key is to be consistent. Okay. So, always make sure your team's on board with what color you use to represent what. So once again, this white here, the solid 100% of that white is shown in blue. Everything shown in white is clear because we wanted you to be able to see the cheese that was inside this container because it was printed on a, it's not fully translucent, it still has a little cloudiness to it, but we wanted you to be able to see that. So that's why we were utilizing the white plate here. We did need 2 hits of that white because we were trying to block out the product as much as we can. We decided let's use the 2 hits of white to give us the best punch of the color, the whitest whites possible for any of the type or the seals. Yeah. So
okay. And then
that
just
is what
at the
you're
key
seeing here.
So looking at the key here, we've got CMYK. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we've got 5 for the green, 6 for the dark green, and then 2 hits of white, which is 8 colors. And then we've got a PMS color, which gives us 9. And then you got rid of black to bring you back down to 8. Is that right?
This one, the 2 hits of white actually counts as 2 stations. So that's why. So this one's a little different than the other printing method. This one, we were able to keep the black.
Okay.
On this because we had more stations available. And the reason being the type of printing it was utilizing versus the other one. So that's what makes all this tricky, right? Because we have the same product, the same colors, different substrates, but different printing techniques and different stations available. So that's where color management really comes into play, maintaining the same color across multiple vendors. That's why we do drawdowns. So we make sure those drawdowns all align to each other and try to get it as cohesive as possible.
What is a drawdown?
So a drawdown is going to be a sample you receive of a spot color on the substrate you're going to be printed on. So that's what you're going to use to gauge and approve, okay, I like how this looks, PMS 214. Great, matches, love it, approved. Or, you know what, I think it's a little off, doesn't quite match, my Pantone book. I'm trying to find if I do have a drawdown here. So this was a drawdown. And once again, like I said, done on the actual substrate. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to compare this to the Pantone book.
Is there a varnish on that?
Yeah. So they will. So if you know ahead of time, which at this point you should, what the varnish is going to be, they will apply that to the drawdown. Sometimes I've gotten a lot of drawdowns where half will be matte, half will be gloss, because maybe in that particular design, we are utilizing both of that. If there's going to be white behind it, they'll still put white behind it. Mm-hmm. So this right here is like your holy grail, right? So when you get on press, they're matching that.
Yeah.
So we're all on the same page. We already have that approved. And I like to do the drawdowns. As soon as I know what colors we want to use, I will ask for a drawdown, because it could take a few days to get, or it could take up to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So you want to build that into your timeline, because you don't want to be going on press without an approved drawdown.
Yeah. No. And then having like the half varnished, half not varnished also gives you a clear idea of what happens to that color under varnish, right? Because that changes, which
it definitely will make a difference for sure.
Which leads me to this.
Uh-oh.
Right. This is my favorite. I love this. So if I'm picking a color
and
I'm like, oh my God, I fell in love with PMS. I got to do this because I'm old. Like PMS 236C. Like, I love this color.
Yeah.
But I want to do this on we're going to do this on an uncoated paper. Can we just print 230C? And why? I don't even understand. Like, why do we have two different books? Like, why is there a C book and a U book? These are two different colors. Like, these colors don't even match. Like,
yeah,
what's the problem here?
We get that a lot too. More from our client being like, how come, the corrugate box that our brand color doesn't look vibrant, doesn't match?
Yeah.
It's because it's uncoated. So the C after, the PMS number means coated. So it's going to have.
So just use a coated ink.
But the corrugate is not coated. If it was, say, litho laminated to corrugate, totally different story. But we are directly printing onto corrugate. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's printing on that substrate. It is uncoated, so you want to pull out your uncoated book, which is probably collecting dust somewhere. Pull that out, look at it. Don't be afraid if, say, you have a brand color that you always use in the coated version. You may have to tweak that color when it goes to uncoated. It may not be the exact same, because I know, for instance, we have a client that used this purple color. And when we looked at it in uncoated, it got dusty. It really, it wasn't the same. So we ended up selecting a different color. Yes, it was slightly different hue, but it looked better. It printed clean. Okay, so there was a difference. So yeah, there is a separate swatch palette too in your Illustrator. You could click on the uncoated version. Same thing with, say, your neons.
Pantone's not in Illustrator anymore.
Oh, well, some of us have a workaround.
But there's a workaround where you can go where you can load your old profiles into your new.
Yeah.
And that's a secret workaround. Maybe we can get into that on a different episode.
Yeah, that's a different episode exclusive. That one you got to pay for.
That's right. No, it's great. I love this question with clients, and it's like the hardest thing to explain. It's not that difficult, but it's always hard. Like, I don't know, this 236. 236 is the ink.
Yeah.
The C and the U is the paper, is the substrate, right? And people are like, why do they show it two different ways? And it's like, it's trying to help you. It's not trying to confuse you, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's getting you a little bit closer. Like, I don't know about you, but I've never seen a cardboard box that was slick and shiny, so it's going to be printed on this dull paper surface, right? This dull corrugate surface. So therefore you need to use the proper ink that's going to be going on that. So yeah, it's a great simulation to tell how it'll look at the end of the day.
Perfect. So I know we're kind of wrapping up here, but before we get to the end, I want to delve into this cheese packaging. So looking at this, you've got a barcode that's for position only.
Yep.
And it's got 90%. What is 90%?
So 90% scaled. 100% was just too big. So I would not go anything less than 80. And then we also call it truncating. So you'll notice this is 90%, but the top half,
sure,
right, has been cut off a little. So we call it truncating. So we truncated this as much as possible, knowing the fact that this is sold in a club store. So there's that extra code that's going above it. We always supply our barcodes as FPO for position only. And usually the printer will then put in the live UPC.
Perfect.
And they have, because that's a separate program. And yes, we can do that, but it's more of a liability thing as well. So,
yeah. So if you do it and it's attached to the artwork and maybe it changes somewhere down the line because the product changes or whatever, and that art is attached, then you become liable for running 100,000 of these with the wrong code.
Yeah.
If it's on the printer, they're going to run the latest one and it just swaps out.
Yeah. Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. I think from a logistical standpoint, it just makes more sense. So.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And on the back, you can see it here, like what the barcode looks like. You're getting all the information. This dark green is the spot. The light green is another spot. Are you overprinting?
So yeah, the reason why we made those a spot color is because the type is really small. Okay, so by it being a spot, it's only one color and we're overprinting it. So therefore, it's being laid down on top of that light green. We're not trying to trap it, because if it wasn't overprinting, you would have to trap behind it, meaning there would be like white behind it. Okay, whatever the substrate, right? We don't want that. This is super small text. There's going to be some shifting, right? So to make it clean, crisp, more legible, we're going to overprint it. We're going to make it a spot color. If it can't be a spot color, a lot of times you make it black. Make it a singular color, because you don't want multiple plates trying to line up all together to create this mouse type. You're going to get registration issues.
What would a registration issue look like here?
I would say if you were to like cross your eyes and it starts to look a little blurry, that's what a registration would look like if you use process. Sure. Now here, if say we didn't overprint this, the registration issue would be a little bit of the actual white plate showing behind it. So you would see a little white. So we don't want to see that, right? Like it would just be really hard to read. This is a FDA, we want to make sure people are able to read the nutrition fact panel and ingredients.
Yeah. So for example, like on the left, if the dark green shifted to the right, you would have a little bit of a white edge showing here because the white would be knocked, or the area would be knocked out of the light green. And then on the right side, you would get a shadow where the dark green was overprinting on the light green. So you'd get a third color.
Yeah, it would kind of look like a 3D effect, but not intentional, right?
Yeah, it would definitely get weird.
Yeah.
So no, I love that. Then, like this is what the club pack looks like. So you got all this color. It looks beautiful. Big, bold delve on the front. And then you've got all this like blue and green and pink color happening on the inside, which definitely stands out at a club store.
Yeah. And this is printed. That's a corrugate box that's holding that. So that was direct print. So we were limited with the amount of colors we could use. We had to use the uncoded color version of everything. We only wanted to use 2 color stations. So we chose the dark green, and then we chose this pale yellow to represent like a cracker, right?
Sure.
Knowing that it's printed on a white corrugate box. So we didn't have to worry about white in this scenario. So there are limitations within corrugate itself, as far as overlapping colors and traps and everything's, it's like a giant rubber stamp that goes down to print on these. Okay. So, there's a lot of movement, a lot of shifting that can go on and that can happen. So you just need to really take that into consideration when you're designing it. That's why it's so important to look at those die lines, make sure all the copies in the copy safe area know those limitations ahead of time.
Perfect. So the detail you're getting on a label, you're not able to get on corrugate.
Not with this type of corrugate. No, not directly printed. If this was a litho lamb situation where you would have more opportunity to print full color, beautiful images. But in this particular scenario, no, this is just down and dirty. Once again, know those limitations, know what you can do. You may have to vectorize some of your images, knowing you can't print a 4-color process, Photoshop, beautiful image on there. So just know that ahead of time.
Perfect. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you some quick hot take questions. I know you're busy. What's the worst substrate to work with?
Oh gosh, I would, no offense to corrugate, but I say that just because of the limitations. You have to really be creative when you're limited. So that would be my
Amazing.
take. Sorry, corrugate. No offense.
The corrugated people are going to get upset just from saying.
I've seen some pretty good. I know.
Right. What's one thing design schools don't teach, but they absolutely should?
I think there's, you need to teach the full process of design, and that's going through concept to mechanical artwork. I think knowing how to build a file that's going to be print ready is super helpful, and is only going to help you when you start concepting and making realistic designs that can print.
Are you using AI in your day-to-day?
Yeah, we definitely incorporated. It's a learning process. I feel like every single day there's some new innovation with it or new AI program coming out. So I'm just, I would say at this point, no one's really an expert because it's constantly changing, right? So it's just a matter of trying to learn the programs, how you can incorporate it within your workflow.
Emboss versus deboss. What is the difference between an emboss and a deboss?
So the emboss really is going to be a raised surface on, say, if you have a flat piece of paperboard, right? And you put your hand across it, it's nice and smooth, and all of a sudden it jumps up. That's an emboss. If that were to go down, if it were to be an impression, that's a deboss. So think deboss like descending. It's going down versus one is going up. And that's all created by a die line, essentially, that's going to press into that board. There's certain degrees of that you can do too, however thick the material is that you're trying to emboss or deboss is going to kind of determine how much you can do to that. Because obviously, if you press that die too much, you're going to rip through
Perfect. So. And I get people confusing those two terms on the daily basis. Yeah. And it's like
deboss, descend. That's the only,
It's like, are you sure you want deboss? Like, let's here's an example. Let's make sure.
It's a little different.
Do you have a favorite packaging structure or that you're saving for the right customer? Is there something you got in the back of your mind? Like, I want to do this.
I explained earlier, we do a lot of flexo on film, right? So bags and pouches. So whenever I see something on paperboard that has all the bells and whistles, has UV coating, embossing, pearlized UV, I get super excited. I have it here on my desk, from J.S. McCarthy. So they sent this out during the holiday time. Mm-hmm. This thing has every single bells and whistles. I know it's hard to see on the camera, but there's a coated texture UV here for the brick pattern. They have pearlized
like
foil.
snow?
Yeah,
Nice.
the snow is pearlized, but then this is like a hologram. I mean, it literally has
Wow.
this tiny little gingerbread house, has every single printing embellishment you can imagine. So that definitely would be a dream of mine because, like I said, most of our clients are in bags and pouches or containers, right? And we're just not doing that. So when I got that, I was like, oh, it's like a dream come true.
No, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for being on. If people want to reach out to you, they can find you at where?
So if people want to reach out to me, you can head to my LinkedIn page at Steph Doyle. Ooh.
And then HBX's website.
Yeah, hbxbranding.com. Check us out. I do some insights page on there if you want to learn a little bit more about Flexovers digital and just what we do.